Control and manipulation of your weapon is a key to mastery. The first place that you see this is when you learn multiple attacks in the first method of PTK Training and 12 attacks as well. What this teaches you is how to control your weapon, how to control the tip, precise manipulation of the tip to specific target areas. In addition to, with multiple attacks, multiple strikes, multiple energies, multiple angles. Precise manipulation of your weapon, precise manipulation and control of the tip specifically in the 12 attacks and multiple attacks. One of the things you should be doing when you're executing the 12 attacks is focusing on where your tip lands in the strikes, the angle, the mechanics, the delivery, putting all of those strikes together, okay, with control, right? So if we think about precise manipulation of the weapon, and we think about, let's take, for example, let's draw an analogy here. We say between learning a language, learning how to write your ABCs, 1, 2, 3, so on and so forth. How do we begin to do that? And what are you developing when you do that? Well, when you first as a kid sit down and start learning to draw your letters, you put the pencil in your hand, teacher puts the pencil in your hand, and you start tracing out your letters, okay? Then eventually you start drawing them, whether you're learning print or whether you're learning cursive or whether you're any language that you're learning. These are symbols. But what's more important here is that you're developing control of the tip of the writing instrument, right? So there's something that goes on between the brain and your hand when you're developing that. So you start to develop how to write your letters, right? How to gain control of the tip so that you are able to write your letters, so that you're able to write your numbers, so that much later you're able to, write full sentences, whatever you want to write, right? Control and manipulation of your weapon is key to mastery. So let's stop and think about that, say, in 12 attacks or multiple attacks, or much later when you get to like florete e jaquete, which is the 9th method in PTK. And one of the things that you see in the older outlines is this little sentence there that says principle of Alphabeto and Numerada, okay? And so I recall from some of my older training that, you learn to trace out your letters, or you trace out your letters, or you trace out your numbers, right? Say like the number 3, 4, 5, okay, 1, 2, so on and so forth with your weapon, specifically with the tip of your weapon. Now, if we think about the analogy that I just made with writing, we want to have precise control of our weapon, right? We want to master the use of our weapon. Okay, we have proprioceptors running throughout all of our muscles in our body connected to our brain that enable us to know where our body is in space. So one of the things that you're learning how to do when you learn to write your letters as a kid is you're developing those fine motor skills, okay, to know where your pencil is on the paper, to know what letter you're writing, right? You're making that connection to your brain. Similarly, you might think that learning to trace your letters or your numbers in the air with, say, the long weapon, okay, that there's nothing, there's nothing special about, a particular number or a particular letter that you're tracing out. Like, for example, the letter Z, right? While that could represent a combination of strikes or, could represent specific blocks or attacks or something along those lines, we might also think about it just simply as a training methodology. And so what do I mean by that as a training methodology? Well, again, let's look at that analogy here. If I am being told by my instructor to trace out letters, okay, or numbers, okay, as I'm doing here, numbers 1, 2, 3, right? 4, okay, B, C, D, in the air. Well, you might think that the training methodology there is for you to gain a different kind of control, different from, say, multiple attacks or 12 attacks, where, say with 12 attacks, you have these precise target areas, right? Temple, or elbow, right? Thrusting to the midsection, wherever that may be on the body. And so by tracing your letters in the air, when you get to florete e jaquete, your focus shifts from a different part of the weapon to, in a very sort of fine and a precise way, to the tip, okay? Because you're being asked to trace out these numbers or letters, okay? And so you're making a different kind of connection in your head, all right, between the head and your hand, and then eventually the tip of the weapon. Again, I mentioned that we have these proprioceptors in our body, proprioceptors that learn to where we know where our body is in space without actually having to look at that limb, right? So if we push that analogy, you're just learning a different kind of control, a more precise control, and it occurs appropriately where you might expect it to be in the system, because we're moving from, say the linear panastosum of 7, the control, right? Placing the tip, okay, and with Teeks, method 8. And then finally, florette educati, a more advanced circular thrusting system. We're learning a more precise control of the tip. And one way to train that, okay, again, as a training methodology, you might believe, is to make that connection between the tip here, okay, our brain, and the tracing out of letters and numbers in the air.